My name is Henry. I was born in a small town in a simple house on a rainy morning. My parents worked hard, my father on the farm, my mother at home, and they loved me very much. I had two brothers. We played together, we laughed together, and we shared every little joy. Life was simple. Life was quiet. Life was slow. And life felt safe in that small town. When I was 10, my father fell sick. My mother cried silently. My brothers worried, and I felt helpless. He could no longer work. He could no longer walk. He could no longer farm. And we had little money. I had to help. I had to learn. I had to grow up, and I had to support my family. I worked after school. I delivered milk. I carried heavy loads, and I never complained about the pain. Those years were hard. The nights were long. The days were tiring, and my hands were always dirty. But I learned courage. I learned strength, I learned patience, and I learned how to survive. My mother stayed strong. My father tried to smile. My brothers helped me, and we held each other. Even in the hardest times, we found moments of joy, moments of laughter, moments of hope, and moments of love. When I was 18, my father passed away. My mother cried softly. My brothers were sad, and I felt lost. I had to leave school. I had to work full-time. I had to care for the family, and I had to grow fast. I moved to the city. I found a small job. I earned little money, and I saved every coin I could. Life was difficult, life was lonely, life was unfair, but I refused to give up or lose hope. I met many people, some kind, some cruel, some helpful, some selfish, and I learned to trust carefully. I rented a small room. I cooked simple meals. I washed my clothes. And I slept on a hard bed. Evenings were long. I thought about home. I thought about my father. I thought about my mother, and I felt pain. But I also thought about the future, about my dreams, about better days, and about building a life worth living. Years passed slowly. I worked in factories, I worked in markets, I worked in offices, and I learned new skills. I met my wife. Her name was Emily. She smiled brightly, she laughed often, and she loved me for who I was. We married simply. We rented a small apartment. We had little money, but we had love and hope. Together we faced struggles. Together we raised children. Together we dreamed. And together we survived. Life was not easy. Bills were many. Responsibilities were heavy. Problems appeared often. But we stood together. Our children grew strong. They learned well. They helped at home, and they made our hearts proud. Emily and I grew older. Our hair turned gray. Our steps grew slower, but our bond grew stronger. We celebrated small victories. We enjoyed small moments. We laughed at small jokes. And we loved deeply. Now I sit alone often. Emily passed years ago. The children live far, but I feel her still. I remember her smile, her hands, her voice, and her endless patience and love for our family. I tell stories to my grandchildren. I share memories with neighbors. I smile at strangers. And I pray daily. Life taught me lessons. Life gave me pain. Life gave me joy. And life gave me love. I am old now. My body is weak. My steps are slow, but my mind is full of memories. I remember the farm, the small town, the rainy mornings, and the love of my parents and family. I remember hard work, long nights, little money, and moments of hope that kept me alive. I remember Emily, our children, our home, and a lifetime of love that made every struggle worth it. Even in the quiet moments, I feel alive. I feel grateful. I feel proud. And I feel full of peace. I learned that life is short, life is precious, life is unpredictable, and life must be lived with courage. I hope my story inspires. I hope my struggles teach. I hope my love shows. And I hope my journey matters. I know I am old. I know I have pain. I know I have lost much. But I have also gained everything that matters. After my parents passed away, I felt alone. I felt scared. I felt lost. And I felt small. I had to leave my town. I had to find work. I had to survive. And I had to grow up quickly. The city was huge. The streets were busy. The buildings were tall, and the people seemed indifferent. Every corner seemed strange. Every voice seemed loud. Every day felt difficult, and every night felt long. I found work in a factory. I lifted heavy boxes. I cleaned floors. I carried loads, and I never complained. My hands became rough. My back hurt. My shoes were worn. And my body ached every evening. I slept in a small room. I cooked simple meals. I washed my clothes, and I counted every coin carefully. Even when I was tired, even when I was hungry, even when I was lonely, I never gave up hope. I met strangers every day. Some were kind, some were harsh, some helped me, and some ignored me completely. I learned to smile, I learned to speak, I learned to work, and I learned to survive without fear. I sent letters home. I prayed quietly. I dreamed about the future, and I promised to do my best. Even in the darkest nights, I thought about home. I thought about family. I thought about love. And I felt courage. One day I saw her. She was different. Her smile was gentle. Her eyes were kind, and she looked at me. Her name was Emily. She worked at the market. She helped people. She smiled at strangers, and she had hope. I wanted to speak. I wanted to approach. I wanted to know, and I wanted to understand her heart. She noticed me often. She waved kindly. She spoke softly, and she made the days feel lighter. We started talking slowly. We shared small stories. We laughed quietly, and we began to trust. She told me about her family. She told me about her dreams. She told me about her struggles. And she told me about love. I told her my story. I told her my fears. I told her my hopes. And I told her about my life in the city. We found comfort together. We found friendship together. We found laughter together, and we found hope together. Time passed quickly. We met every day. We helped each other. We laughed together, and we dreamed together. We decided to marry. We had little money. We rented a small apartment, and we promised to build a life together. The wedding was simple. The food was modest. The guests were few. But love filled every corner of the room. I held her hand. She held mine. We whispered promises. And we felt a joy we had never known before. After marriage, we faced challenges. Bills were many. Work was hard. And life was not easy. She worked at home, I worked in the city. We saved every coin, and we planned for a better future. We shared small meals, we cleaned together, we repaired our home, and we laughed at small jokes. Even when tired, even when hungry, even when stressed, we held on, we prayed, and we loved. Our first child came, a baby boy. His hands were tiny, his cries were loud, and our hearts overflowed. We cared for him. We watched him grow. We taught him gently, and we gave him all our love. The second child arrived, a baby girl. Her laughter was sweet, her steps were careful, and our home became brighter. We worked even harder. We gave even more. We protected them always, and we dreamed even bigger. Life became busy. Days were full. Nights were short. And we were always moving. We learned patience, we learned teamwork, we learned sacrifice, and we learned strength. Even in hard times, we found joy. Even in difficult days, we found laughter. Even in pain, we found hope. Love carried us. Love guided us. Love healed us. And love made every struggle worthwhile. As the years passed, our children grew. They ran faster. They laughed louder. And they learned more. We watched them carefully, we guided them gently, we supported them fully, and we prayed for them daily. Their school days were busy, their games were long, their questions were many, and their dreams were big. We celebrated their successes, we comforted their failures, we taught them courage, and we shared our love. Emily and I worked hard. We saved every coin. We repaired our home. And we planned for the future. The neighborhood knew us, neighbors respected us, friends visited us, and everyone admired our bond. Even in difficult times, we stayed strong. We stayed patient. We stayed hopeful. And we stayed together. Every evening we sat together, we talked quietly, we laughed softly, and we shared memories of the past. Our eldest went to college, far from home, leaving us quiet, leaving us worried, leaving us proud. We missed him dearly. We wrote letters often. We sent gifts carefully, and we prayed every night. Our daughter grew kind. Our youngest learned fast. Our children became strong, and they filled our hearts. We taught them respect. We taught them honesty. We taught them patience. And we taught them love. Life was not always easy. Bills arrived faster, illnesses appeared, problems grew, and work was tiring. Emily became tired. I became worried. The children were busy, but we stayed strong together. We laughed whenever possible. We smiled through pain. We helped each other always, and we never gave up. Our home was small. Our income was modest. Our problems were many, but our hearts were full. One winter came harsh, snow-covered streets, winds blew strong, and nights were freezing cold. Our children could not visit. Friends were far. We stayed inside, and we stayed close together. Emily baked bread. I chopped wood. We lit fires, and we watched the smoke rise gently. The warmth was small. The nights were long. The wind was strong. But our love was endless. Years passed slowly. Our hair turned gray. Our steps grew slow, our faces wrinkled. But our hearts stayed young. We shared memories of the past. We laughed at old stories. We cried at old sorrows. And we whispered our love. Sometimes I held her hand. Sometimes I kissed her cheek. Sometimes I brushed her hair. And sometimes I prayed for her. Even when tired, even when weak, even when scared, we stayed close, we stayed kind, we stayed in love. Our children married, they had children, they visited often, and they brought joy into our home. Grandchildren ran everywhere. They laughed loudly, they asked questions, and they filled our days with light. Emily told them stories, she sang them songs, she guided their hands, and she smiled constantly. I watched quietly. I smiled softly. I remembered my youth, and I thanked God for this life. The house became full again. The garden became bright. The rooms became noisy, and the nights became joyful. Our home was alive, with love in every corner, with laughter in every room, with hope in every heart. We grew older together. We faced sickness. We faced fatigue. But our love never weakened. Even in pain, even in struggle, even in worry, we stayed side by side. We stayed united. We stayed faithful. One summer evening, we walked slowly, hand in hand, along the river, under the setting sun. The air was warm, the water was calm, the sky was orange, and the birds flew quietly. We talked softly, we shared memories, we laughed gently, and we felt peace in our hearts. That day was simple, that day was calm, that day was perfect, and that day was ours forever. Emily often whispered, "We made it together. We survived everything. We loved deeply, and we are blessed." I smiled back. I held her hand. I kissed her gently, and I thanked God silently. We knew that life is short, that love is strong, that hope is endless, and that family is everything. We promised each other again to stay together always, to love endlessly, and to never forget this journey. As the years passed, our children grew older. They faced challenges, they learned lessons, and they became responsible. Emily and I watched proudly. We gave advice, we shared memories, and we supported their choices. We learned to adapt, we learned to listen, we learned to forgive, and we learned patience every day. The house felt alive, filled with laughter, filled with learning, and filled with love that never faded. Our grandchildren came often. Their voices were loud, their steps were quick, and their hugs were warm. We guided them gently, we told them stories, we shared our wisdom, and we laughed at their mistakes. They learned respect, they learned kindness, they learned courage, and they learned how love can last. Even in small moments, even in simple days, even in quiet nights, life felt full and meaningful. Emily grew weaker. Her steps were slower. Her hands trembled often, and her breathing became shallow. I stayed close to her. I held her hand. I cooked her meals, and I cared for her without complaint. Doctors visited often. Medicines were many. Nights became restless, and days felt uncertain and long. Even in sickness, she smiled softly. She spoke gently. She prayed quietly, and she loved deeply still. One winter evening, snow-covered streets, wind blew harshly, nights were long, and the fire burned dimly. Emily rested quietly. She held my hand, she whispered softly, and she told me she was ready. I felt my heart ache. I felt tears fall. I felt fear, and I whispered my love back to her slowly. She closed her eyes gently. She breathed softly. She smiled faintly, and she left peacefully from my side. The house became quiet. The rooms felt empty. The nights were longer, and the mornings felt heavier. Children came often. They hugged me tightly. They reassured me calmly, and they brought warmth to the house. Grandchildren played softly. They laughed gently. They asked questions, and they reminded me of Emily's love. I told them stories of her. I shared memories of us. I spoke of her courage, and I showed them her heart. Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months. Months turned to years. And I grew older each day. I walked slowly in the garden. I watched the sunset. I listened to the wind, and I thought of her often. Her voice stayed in my mind. Her smile stayed in my heart. Her touch stayed in my soul, and her love stayed alive. Even in quiet moments, even in lonely nights, even in heavy days, I felt her with me always. I shared my time with the children. I taught them gently. I guided their steps, and I laughed softly. The house became full again, with life and joy, with small victories, and with the love she left behind. I celebrated small moments. I remembered old stories. I smiled at every sunset, and I prayed every day. Even in pain, even in struggle, even in loss, I found strength, I found courage, and I found hope. Neighbors visited often. They asked about Emily. They asked about me. They shared stories, and they brought comfort. I realized clearly, love never ends, hope never dies, memories remain forever, and life is always precious. Even in silence, even in loneliness, even in grief, I felt peace, I felt courage, and I felt her near. Her lessons stayed with me. Her kindness stayed in me. Her love stayed around me, and her spirit stayed alive. I often sat by the river. I watched the sky, I felt the breeze, and I remembered our life together. The water flowed gently, the birds sang softly, the sun shone warmly, and my heart felt calm. I thought about our struggles. I thought about our joys. I thought about our children, and I felt grateful. Every moment mattered. Every memory mattered. Every lesson mattered. And every day was a gift from love. Even as I grew older, even as my body weakened, even as my steps slowed, my heart stayed strong. I smiled at the children, I hugged the grandchildren, I shared stories daily, and I prayed quietly at night. Life had given me much, life had taken some, life had tested me, and life had taught me everything. I knew clearly, love is eternal, family is priceless, hope is endless, and memories never fade away. I woke up slowly. The house was quiet. The sun shone softly, and the morning felt calm and gentle. I walked to the garden. I touched the flowers. I listened to the birds, and I remembered Emily's smile. Her laughter echoed in my mind. Her hands stayed in my memory. Her voice whispered softly, and her love stayed alive. Even in her absence, I felt her near, guiding me, protecting me, and filling every corner of my life. The children visited often, they hugged me tightly, they asked about her, and they shared stories of our family. The grandchildren ran freely. They laughed joyfully, they shouted happily, and they filled the rooms with life again. I taught them gently, I showed them patiently, I guided them carefully, and I reminded them of love's power. Even in small gestures, even in quiet words, even in soft smiles, they learned what love truly means. I spent hours by the river. I watched the water flow. I counted the birds flying, and I felt the world around me. The wind blew softly, the trees swayed gently, the clouds moved slowly, and I breathed deeply, feeling peace. I thought about my youth. I thought about my struggles. I thought about Emily, and I remembered every small moment. Life had been long, life had been hard, life had been full, and life had been beautiful in unexpected ways. Sometimes I felt lonely, sometimes I felt tired, sometimes I felt weak, and sometimes I felt afraid. But I remembered Emily. I remembered our love. I remembered our children. And I remembered our strength together. Her spirit guided me, her lessons taught me, her love healed me, and her memory gave me courage every day. Even when nights were dark, even when days were hard, even when tears fell, I felt her presence near me. I walked slowly through the rooms. I touched old pictures. I smiled at old gifts. And I remembered our life. Every corner had a memory. Every object held a story. Every smell reminded me of her. And every sound brought peace. I spoke to her quietly. I whispered my love. I thanked her for life. And I promised to carry her forever. Even in silence, even in solitude, even in old age, our bond remained, strong, unbroken, and eternal. Neighbors came often. They brought meals. They shared news, and they reminded me that life continues. I listened to their stories. I offered advice. I laughed at their jokes, and I felt part of a bigger world. The community became my family. The garden became my refuge. The house became my sanctuary, and the memories became my strength. Even in simple days, even in ordinary hours, even in quiet moments, life was meaningful and full of love. Sometimes I sat alone at night. I looked at the stars, I felt the wind, and I prayed silently. I thanked God for Emily. I thanked God for children. I thanked God for grandchildren. And I thanked God for life. I forgave the past. I embraced the present. I hoped for the future. And I lived each day with gratitude. Even in pain, even in sorrow, even in struggle, I found peace. I found joy. And I found courage. One spring morning, I felt a gentle breeze. I saw the sun rise, I heard birds sing, and I smiled quietly. I remembered all our struggles, all our joys, all our children, and all the love we had shared. Life had been unpredictable. Life had been challenging. Life had been beautiful. And life had been ours together.
Even in old age, even in loss, even in silence, love remained, hope survived, and memories lived forever.
I walked slowly to the garden. I touched the flowers. I watched the birds, and I felt Emily near. I remembered every word, every touch, every smile, and every promise we had made. I smiled at the sky. I whispered her name. I felt her hand, and I closed my eyes peacefully. That day felt eternal. That moment felt complete. That love felt endless, and that life felt perfect. Now I tell my story. I share my life. I teach about love, and I show the power of hope. Every struggle matters. Every challenge teaches. Every loss shapes us. And every joy strengthens us. I hope my children remember. I hope my grandchildren learn. I hope the world understands. And I hope love lasts. Even when I leave, even when I am gone, even when time ends, love remains, memories endure, and life matters.